Oh no, it's happened again. Oh, hey Ludo. After last episode and all the debacle over Silent Hill 2's camera, I wanted to sit down and play some other nostalgic fixed-point camera games to take me back, and boy, did I mess up big time. Well, I think I found it. The worst boss fight of all time. What's so bad about it? Well, to fully understand why it sucks a slug's arse, we first need to ask, well, what makes a good boss fight? Well, a boss boiled down to its most basic form is a narrative or mechanical climax, testing the player on mechanics they've been taught previously throughout the game, or a dramatic conclusion to a conflict in its narrative, or ideally, both. And no, this doesn't have to boil down to simply being locked in a room with a big dude beating him with a stick till he drops dead. Whatever your mechanical expressions or verbs are, then the boss should be testing their execution, or at the very least, encouraging their usage. And Ori and the Will of the Wisps has some of the best boss designs I've ever seen in this regard, testing its players on 4 aspects simultaneously, with platforming, combat, individual area mechanical expression, and also having narrative meaning set up throughout said area. The bosses chase players through an environment, testing their platforming skills, which also encourages or even requires the usage of abilities that were recently acquired, eventually cornering them in an arena to test their combat skills, making these incredible mechanical bosses, but also standing tall narratively as well. Well, these bosses reoccur and stalk the player throughout their adventure, possessing friends that you've been helping throughout your journey. Finally, defeating them does affect positive change in the world that can also be felt throughout its level design, but at the cost of a life. This is just incredible. If a boss can simultaneously mechanically test its players, encourage the usage of newly acquired abilities, and be a narrative obstacle for the player to overcome, you have the recipe for a super impactful boss encounter. Well, what would a bad boss look like? We'll just remove any of these aspects. Well, no, actually, you can have a boss that is underwhelming mechanically, that hits hard narratively due to its build-up, like the Divine Dragon in Sekiro. Would you consider that a bad boss because it lacks the same mechanical complexity to its predecessors? I'd say no, it succeeds in other ways. The same thing for a boss that is mechanically complex, but has little to no narrative impact. And I always think to that one cinematic they did for Elder Scrolls Online, where the 3 main heroes are fighting that one random guard and they get absolutely schooled. An encounter can still be challenging and rewarding to experience without it having some deeper narrative conclusion, and it can even begin new narrative threads for that character. Bosses don't need to tick all of these boxes to be considered good. It's a case-by-case basis, and the real problem lies when you don't do either of these things, leading to the absence of meaning. Oh, you think you could make a better boss, do you? Well, why don't you prove it with today's sponsor?
This video is brought to you by GameMaker, the free, fast, and easy-to-use 2D game engine that helps power modern classics like Undertale, Hotline Miami, and Hyper Light Drifter. Starter templates, official asset bundles, and a wealth of tutorials are available to help bring your ideas to life. And you can export and share your game for free on all non-console platforms. But you don't have to take my word for it, I'm just some jerk. We have an actual bona fide game maker on hand.
Oh shit, that's me. Yes, I've been using GameMaker for a long time. It's probably the most powerful and easiest to use engine for making 2D games out there, suitable for both amateurs and hardcore coders, and with all the Steam and console integration stuff for when you're ready to start monetizing your hobbies. I used it to make my recently released game, Starstruck Vagabond, which has already delighted thousands of sci-fi cozy game aficionados, thanks to GameMaker being so bloody great.
Head on over to the GameMaker link in the description to begin your game development journey today.
Alright Ludo, show me this boss you've cooked up then. Well, what kind of abilities does it have? Fire tits. Right, well it's still not as bad as what I found. Alright, enough teasing, let's finally get to the game that's housing the worst boss fight of all time like some kind of poorly made SCP. No, it's not Prince of Persia, it's Devil May Cry 2, which is the sequel to Devil May Cry that completely shit on the original from a great height in many different ways. Excuse this small rant, but my god, when you think of a sequel, what do you think of? At best you can expect an improvement on the series mechanics, or at worst, maybe a carbon copy of the first game just in new areas. Well, DMC2 removes mechanics from the first game. The original had such a diverse range of melee weapons, and each one having their own unique movesets, but here, there are only only 3, and their movesets are all completely the same, apart from attack speed and damage. And this just makes combat feel so formulaic and stagnant, destroying any excitement of finding new melee weapons. And this is made 10 times worse by the fact that in the shop you can spend a currency to upgrade your weapons. But if they all have the same moveset and I've just spent a fortune upgrading the first sword for half the game before I found the next one, what motive do I have to switch in the first place? Because of all of this, combat just feels so clunky, and this isn't helped by the ever-shifting camera angles. See, it's fascinating to me that in my previous episode, I was raving about how the fixed-point camera was arguably the driving force for the atmosphere of Silent Hill 2, but this same exact camera system viewed through the lens of an action game can completely mess up the experience, schizophrenically switching between different camera angles as you jump around attempting to relocate the same enemy 50 times in a row because your controls are constantly being reorientated. Yeah, okay, the rant's over. Actually, they also completely bastardized Dante's character, taking him from a quippy, kinda cringe at times badass to a stoic, arrogant dickhead who, when presented with the opportunity to save an entire village from destruction, he flips a coin for it. I am fucking fuming! Yeah, me too, coin wench. But back to the bosses, most of them are extremely basic, not just mechanically, but also in how they attempt to give them narrative complexity. For example, we are introduced to this brooding demon man after fighting his 2 dogs, who then just disappears. Well, okay, they're setting up an overarching villain watching us from afar. No, I dig it. But then 2 areas and 1 hour later, down some hole in the ground, he turns up again, says nothing, and dies. Oh, and he's not done. 2 hours later, it turns out actually he's not dead, and he just dies again. What? A percentage of setup with negative payoff, but this is nothing compared to the debauchery of this next boss, which I consider to be the worst boss of all time. Oh god, okay, so this boss is encountered 5 missions in, and narratively isn't some brooding mystery villain or the over-the-top underlord, it's a helicopter. Nah, that's it. And the most egregious thing you'll notice straight away from initiating this boss fight will be the fact that you cannot even see the boss itself due to the opening camera angle, which does not move and does not improve as the fight progresses. Oh, and on top of all of that, it is a purely ranged enemy, so half of your arsenal is completely useless. Even Dante's flying demon form either doesn't last long enough for you to be able to locate the boss, or in most cases, can't even reach it. So you just have to sit there and shoot at it. In retaliation to this, the boss spams the same 2 attacks. One doesn't even target you and misses half the time, but it also fires homing missiles, but they get auto-targeted by your gun and get shot out of the sky, immediately making both of these attacks utterly useless. So you sit there and slowly chip away at its massive health bar until it, I think, drops dead. The game doesn't actually show you what happens because the camera angle was chosen by a shrimp with astigmatism. It's over. I fucking wish, Ludo. Time to ascend a burning building and repeat phase 1. Oh god, this is so boring. Oh, why would I not try and engage with melee combat? Well, because the game basically begs you not to. Not only is it practically impossible to reach it, why would you? In the aerial demon form, you not only get the ability to pseudo-fly, but it also gives you machine gun hands that utterly rinse the boss's health bar. So tell me this, Ludo, if I have the choice between a prolonged fight that I get no enjoyment out of, or blast it out of the sky, which coincidentally consists of me standing still and doing nothing while it auto-targets, which am I gonna choose? Yeah, that's right, a bad time, which is coincidentally both options. Oh, and Ludo, we're not done. Ascend the skyscraper to its penultimate point where the devs tease you with these pillars that it might be possible to engage with melee combat, but no. It can't be reached, and if you attempt to juggle combo it mid-air, it sends you plummeting down a pit. How dare you want to engage with mechanics, you middling slug? Get down there and just shoot it mindlessly until it dies, I think. Is it dead? It's dead. At least it was over quickly. See, I admire your positivity, Ludo, but that boss fight takes 20 minutes, mate. 20 minutes of this 3-hour and 20-minute campaign is taken up by this single boss fight. What? How is this even possible? This isn't just a bad boss. This is an insult to its players. Let's go over our criteria. Narrative? Well, it's certainly an object in the world that we have to fight. I guess, and mechanics, this might be the single greatest flub I have ever seen. It doesn't facilitate the usage of 2/3 of your available abilities and even actively encourages its players to behave in the most boring and unengaging way. Why go for combos and star rankings when the boss is actively fighting from allowing you to even do that at a basic level? It totally goes against everything that Devil May Cry is, and don't get me wrong, most bosses here aren't much better, but this one takes the cake. Well, I guess this is what happens when you don't ask the director or original team to return for the sequel's development, and then give Team 2 a year and a half to pump out the sequel with zero knowledge of how the original was made, and on top of all of that, the unnamed director helming the project was fired about 5 to 6 months before development was completed, and then Hideaki Itsuno was brought in to overhaul the entire experience before release, meaning that most likely a lot of the design decisions made in this game were done under intense time pressure, and if any changes did need to be made, they only had 5 months to make them happen. My God, it's honestly a miracle that this game even exists and we got any sequels at all. And I mean, I'm glad because DMC 3 through 5 absolutely slap, but I am simply baffled. But what do you think? Show me a man who says he knows of a worse boss fight than this, and I'll show you a liar. Lest, do you know of any bosses that are worse than this abomination, and if so, why? What makes them so abhorrent? Let us know down below, because we would love to discuss this with you. Oh yeah, so tomorrow is the 1-year anniversary of this Second Wind community, and we're so eternally grateful for all of your support here on YouTube and Patreon, and to celebrate that, we're going to be streaming all day with lots of fun announcements, so come hang out, have fun, and celebrate this wonderful community with us. Alright, Ludo, time to say goodbye. Alright, bye guys.